I mostly read public domain books here on Glenn Reads Books to You, and they were written a long time ago, so they're usually racist, or sexist, or bigoted, but in there somewhere is a story, and that's why those stories are famous. Other times, I read works from independent authors, and they're delightfully not racist, but they might have adult language or adult situations, like, making sex. So that's your warning, but I'm sure you're grown up enough to handle it. Don't write to me complaining. God damn it. All right. Take a seat, you little idiot. I'm going to finish what I started. Fuck! 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 God damn it. Welcome to the Glenn Reads Books to You mansion. It's a fun little bit where I pretend to live in a mansion and not just recording in my basement. As I read the hottest public domain books and short stories. This week, we're going to keep reading Hellflower by George O. Smith, which I'm sure is going to be socially acceptable in the next couple of years. You want to learn a little bit about the author? Sure. George O. Smith, born April 9th, 1911, died May 27th, 1981. I was in first grade when he died, and I had no idea that this weird, creepy guy existed. He was an American science fiction author, and I got rid of the part where they say, don't get him confused with whoever... I'm tired. Smith was an active contributor to astounding science fiction during the golden age of science fiction in the 1940s. His collaboration with None of This Matters. Smith continued regularly publishing science fiction novels and stories till the 1960s. His output greatly diminished during the... Nobody cares. He's a member of the all-male literary banqueting club called the Trapdoor Spiders, so that fit in well with today's environment, which served as the basis of Isaac Asimov's fictional group of mystery solvers, the Black Widowers. Here's some fun facts that I stole from ebookfriendly.com. Sure, why not? We have nothing else to look forward to in our lives. According to the Guinness World Records, not the Guinness Book of World Records. This was written by AI. The largest book in the world weighs over 3,000 pounds and measures 16.40 feet by 26.44 feet. Unveiled by Mishhad International Group in Dubai, UAE, on the 27th of February 2012. The largest non-published book to date is titled This, the Prophet Muhammad, and is a compilation of stories highlighting the lifetime achievements of Islam's prophet. Over 50 people took part in the construction of the text. The largest book ever published, The Little Prince, is almost 7 feet high and 10 feet wide. What's with these people just custom making big books? Just like somebody will look at them for like 5 minutes and be like, wow, that's a big book, and never think about you again. The record is held by an edition of The Little Prince. Wasn't the previous largest book was in the United Arab Emirates, and now it's The Little Prince? Again, I think AI wrote this. None of this makes any sense. By Brazilian publishing company Eduardo Publicações, which presented at the 13th Biannual Book Fair of Rio de Janeiro. Oh, thank God. I can't do this shit anymore. Why don't we go downstairs and to the library and read this book? Well, there you go. Why don't you take a little seat? You enjoying yourself? It looks like you've been playing outside all day. Apparently you're not wearing shoes because your dirty-ass feet have been walking through my entire house. You been having a good time? Well, enjoy it while you can. Chapter 8. In the salon of the Lancaster, Faradine smiled knowingly. The plan was to let you investigate this ship while I dressed, but I gather you have seen your share of spacers. I admit it, she replied, and for that I am sorry, Charles, but I couldn't very well have played the know-it-all, could I? burp. I suppose not. Well, park yourself somewhere while I get into the whites. What is underwear? She sat down and stretched. A highball and a cigarette, she inquired. Oh, the cigarette is easy, he said, handing her one and flipping his lighter. But the highball, maybe more difficult. I'm nothing but White Star Trail aboard. She nodded at him. With water, she said. Is this like a non-alcoholic? I've been assuming this is like a non-alcoholic drink or something. So it's kind of weird that everyone's like, with water. As she said, she relaxed into the cushions. Yeah, Firedine went and mixed her a highball. She sipped it and nodded approvingly. Charles, please go dress, but fast. I am rather more hungry than curious about the insides of a spacer. Of course, he turned to go. Charles, she rose and came forward, lifting her hands to put them on his shoulders. He stood, woodenly. Charles, she asked in a soft voice, are you happy because I'm not the girl you hoped I'd be? Faradine wanted to hurt her. How many men have you played this role for, he asked. A wry smile twisted her face. Oh, I should slap your face for that, she said. But because when I tell you the answer, you won't believe me. Caution came to him. He was the rookie Hellflower operator, not the young man who had discovered that his girl had been playing games behind his back. He tried to fit himself into her picture, decided that according to her code of loused-up ethics, she might possibly be thinking of a future, a pleasant home with rambling roses and large lawn, and a devoted husband. Maybe a handful of happy children. Yeah, all creating the solid citizen facade for dope running. But just as her parents were doing, if this were the case, Faradine was to play the suitor. He must carry roses for his wife in one hand, toys for the kids in the other, and his hip pocket must be filled with hellflowers. He played it. He relaxed and put his hands on her waist. I admit to being a bit of a louse, yeah, he said with a brief laugh. Yeah, but that's because I'm a bit new at a very rough game. She leaned forward a bit. Oh, even rough games have their rules. Oh, I'll play according to the rules as soon as I learn them. She looked at him. You know them, she said quietly. All men and women learn them at home, in school, in church. Oh, they're sensible rules, and they keep people out of trouble. Mostly. If you adhere to the rules, people will have nothing which their attention can be directed. That's what Father was trying to say when he suggested that you provide a visible means of support for yourself. Play by these rules and we'll get along. It's especially important when we must not have people looking in our direction, Charles. She sighed and leaned against him softly. You asked me a question, Charles. The answer is 3. One of them preferred a blonde, and they're living quietly and happily in Callisto. The second couldn't have gelled because he was the kind of man who would work 18 hours a day. Some men are that way, and some women like it that way, but not me. Oh, the third, Charles, was Michael. Mike didn't last long. Only long enough to prove to me that he was a woman chaser. Oh, the fourth could be you. Maybe there mightn't be a fifth. 3 men in your life, he said. She smiled up into her eyes. 3 men in my life, she said, with a happy little nod of her head. Yeah, but Charles, it isn't 3 men in my bedroom. Wow, lucky for him. Again, written by a man who's like, I want an easy woman that's never had sex. But Charles, it isn't 3 men in my bedroom. Carolyn cocked an eyebrow. The only way the fourth will get in is to make sure there won't be a fifth. So now you know. You can play it from there. His arms did not slip around a slender waist, but his hands pulled her close to him. He kissed her gently. And for a moment, she clung to him with their body. Her response was affectionate, only bordering on passion. And then she leaned back and smiled into his face. You need a shave, she told him. So let go of me until you can kiss me without scratching my skin off. And then to prove that she didn't really mean it, Carolyn kissed him again, briefly, and ended by rubbing her forehead against his chin. Faradine went to his stateroom and showered. He shaved and dressed carefully in white slacks and a shirt. Oh, and at last, remaining a holdover from Victorian period, a dark necktie. He returned to the salon to find Carolyn waiting for him calmly and patiently. Oh, she looked him over and nodded approvingly. That's weird. I never had anyone do that to me in my entire life. And then because I'm ugly. And then got up and rubbed her cheek against his, cooing pleasantly, but moved away again when he tried to kiss her. Then she tucked her hand under his elbow and said, "Dinner, man thing." What? Faraday chuckled. "Dinner," he repeated. She hugged his arm. He led her down the landing ramp and into her car. I like to think... I shouldn't go off on it. I like to think that it's like he's in this like ship that's just supposed to ship cargo, and he's got a loading ramp. So he's got this woman who's like, "I just want someone to marry me." And he's like, "Ha ha, well, let's go out on our date." And they walk down the loading ramp together. Much like if I was a truck driver and it's like, "I'm going to go shower in the back of my truck." And it's like, "Okay, ready to go." And then you drop down the back of the semi-truck thing where you load. "Let's go." He would like walk down the metal ramp. The food was good. Carolyn was a fine dancer with a high sense of her rhythm and a graceful body. Faraday decided that if this were a thankless job, that he gave no chance for fame and fortune. There are plenty of pleasant facets to it. Her shoulder rubbed his as he drove her home hours later. Oh, he handed her out of the car and walked to the front door with her. She gave him a key. And he opened the door, and she walked in to wait for him just inside. She came into his arms as the door closed behind him, and she clung to him, returning his kiss and his embrace, matching his rising fervor, with a passion of her own. Parted minutes later, Faraday moved her slightly, settling her body into a more comfortable fit against him, which is something that I've always had a problem with. Anytime I ever, you first date someone and you kind of make out with them a little bit, it's like, I don't know where the comfortable fit is. And you're kind of pushing their body from one side to the other. Kind of get the left hip to my right hip, that kind of thing. I'm like, this doesn't feel right. But he got her into a comfortable fit. "It's late," she breathed. Faraday chuckled. "With the sun shining like that," when she kissed him, amused. "Oh, it's always like that, silly. You're on Mercury. Remember?" Faraday held her close and kissed her again. A minute passed before he came up for air. He looked at her, leaning his head back so that he could see her face without looking cross-eyed. That's got to be a weird googly expression. It's just... Why did he write that? "I'll bet you are a real hellion in the dark." Carolyn laughed, "Yeah," and shook her head. "Like all the rest of the women on Mercury, I'm scared to pieces of the dark. But it is late, Charles, and you've got to go." She hugged his head down so that he could look at her wrist and watch on the arm. Okay, about her neck. It's 5 o'clock, and you are to take off at 9, Charles, so please don't crack up just because of lack of sleep." "Okay," he said regretfully. "Okay." She held him close. "Oh, it's been a nice evening, Charles. So kiss me goodbye, and remember that it won't be long until I see you on Terra." It gets dark on Terra," he told her. He tightened his arms, and she pressed against him. Against his lips, she murmured, "I might not be afraid of the dark, Charles." The promise of her last embrace stayed with him. There were only 3 hours of sleep between the time he left her and the time of awakening for takeoff, but dreams of Carolyn filled them all. Probably stress dreams. They were pleasant dreams. Oh, okay. And they were unpleasant dreams and stress dreams. He saw Carolyn coming to him with her past renounced. Oh, he saw her coming to him as a secret agent who was in a hellish business for the same reason he was. And he dreamed of her waving him goodbye with her dark eyes filled with tears as she was taken off to the Titan penal colony. He even entertained a notion of joining her, justifying himself by thinking that people who fall in love with lotus addicts are the weaklings of the human race and could be eradicated on the advantage of a general level. This he recognized as sophistry. Wow, he's an intelligent man. But be it as it may, Carolyn was pleasant, attractive companion, and her presence could only have been known for a very short time. It was nonetheless pleasant. Oh, it was a rough game they were playing, and many people were bound to get hurt. More people innocent people would get hurt if he called it off. So, by the time Faraday and his dreams came to a conclusion, that he could afford to take what pleasure he could out of his life situation offered for a moment and to let tomorrow extract its tribute. Oh, it was time to get out of bed and start the pre-flight checkoff. He had work to do, school marms to haul to Pluto, and some refined theorem ore to bring to Terra, and he would make no signal this trip. He was still far from being on the inside. Well, maybe the next or one after that, depending on his progress, but in the meantime, he would be seeing Carolyn Niles on Terra. Faraday began his checkup, already anticipating the reunion, which was at least 10 days away. No, that's a short chapter, thank God, for the love of Christ. Why don't we go down to my basement? Seems like a place to go, especially in these modern times. Let's just sit in my basement and let's just sulk for a while. Shut up. It's fine. Hey, shut up. It's totally fine. The basement is not a creepy place. I've made it very comfortable down there, and it's not weird at all. So why don't you go meet me down in the basement while I tell you about the latest upcoming books from Penguin Random House. Oh, well, there you are. You made it down here to the basement, where I want you to sit in that folding chair underneath that naked light bulb while I stand here, underneath this naked light bulb, and play my guitar for you. What happened to all the cool furniture that I use for all the, like to make you feel like a cool teen hanging out my basement? Had that big, beautiful couch and that coffee table, little rug, and then also the tube television, which I had a Google TV hooked up to. I threw it all away, because that's how I'm feeling right now. Do you want to learn about the latest upcoming books from Penguin Random House? We might as well just get to the point. Sex Lives of Superheroes. Wolverine's immortal sperm, Superman's porn career, and the Thing's thing, and other supersexual matters explained by Diana McCollum. The category is clearly humor in comics. You want to learn about... Sure. Is sex with the Hulk technically a threesome? Does the Flash do everything faster? Oh, has Wonder Woman ever really never faked an orgasm? Explore these questions and more with this collection of speculative comedic essays on how superpowers might affect the sex lives of famous superheroes based on the genuine scientific research and both Marvel and DC comic book and movie. I don't care. Let's just go back upstairs and read the rest of this book. You can get this horse shit for $19 at Amazon, Barnes & Noble Books, MillionBookshop.org, Hudson Booksellers, Powell's, Target, and you'll be shopping probably all the time for the rest of your life. Walmart. Coming on November 19th. Let's just go back upstairs. All right, take a seat. Chapter 9. They came aboard a half hour later, and Faraday saw at once that this trip would be free of trouble and danger. They were all mild and wide-eyed curious. They obviously knew their place and how to go about life with a minimum of friction. Their leader was Professor Martin, an agile gentleman of about, 60 years, who led them up the ramp and then stood there, introducing each and every one of them to Faraday as they came in. They became a sea of faces and a sound of disconnected names, except for a few more of the vivid ones. Miss Otis, who giggled like a schoolgirl, but hadn't been a schoolgirl at age for at least 30 years. She's not that old. What an asshole. Mr. Hughes, dark of skin and smiling, who tried to convey the impression of what he knew his way around space. A very prim dame named Miss Higginbotham, who probably had every kid in her class scared of her. Miss Logan, who was far too beautiful to be part of Faraday's narrow pattern of school teachers. Okay, that's her only worth. Miss Tilden seemed to know something about spacing, and her friend, who was old enough to be Miss Tilden's mother, Miss Carewee, who knew more about spacing than Miss Tilden, and Mr. Forbes, who seemed completely impressed by everything he laid eyes on. And so they came. a prim and straight-laced lot, of which Faraday had not seen in a long, long time. Certainly nothing of the Hellflower flavor among this group. It made Faraday feel easier, and after a bit he began to smile at their innocence and their wholehearted interest, and he came to understand that this trip was to be a bit different for them, or if it could be he cared to make it so. It was obvious that their previous hops had been made under pilots who treated them with the usual aloofness that spacemen hold for their passengers. Faraday felt a little more sympathetic about them. He wanted to help, wanted to show them what could be seen. Part of his desire to help them have a good time was born in the idea that someday Faraday would probably be looking for some character witness if he had treated these school teachers with cordial interest and a willingness to explain and demonstrate his spacecraft. They could be inclined to accept him as a man of understanding, honesty, and ability. So, they took off after Faraday delivered a very short talk on the rigors of takeoff maneuvering and the necessity of staying strapped down whenever the spacer was about to cut didos. All right, I'll look up didos. I want to find out what that means. Come on. The queen and founder of Carthage, who fell in love with a shipwrecked Athena. Okay, well, good enough for me. That's probably not the meaning, but I don't give a shit. I don't care about anything. It was even less of a strain than Faraday anticipated. They helped. Miss Carey was a home economics teacher, and she took care of the galley in a highly efficient manner. Mr. Forbes taught a manual training of some sort, and he requisitioned an oil can and removed the squeaks from a couple of doors and took care of some of the minor details that Faraday was inclined to ignore because he had other things on his mind. Someone, Faraday never found out who, made beds and policed the ship, cleaning the salon and passengers' quarters until the rooms and hallways shone. Whoever it was did not recognize the faint stains of blood, apparently, because there was no questions asked about the evidence of Mike Cahill's death. Miss Tilden spent quite a bit of time making a small oil painting for the space above the bar, which she had looked vacant. She just had oil painting stuff with her on hand, and just like, well, time to paint, we're in space. The degree of their tolerance was high, too. None of them cared for drinking, but they approved of Faraday and his White Star Trail. In return, Faraday took them to the control room and showed them how the ship was run. Professor Hughes toyed with the computer by the hour because he was a mathematics teacher. And Miss Tilden listened to Faraday by the hour as he recounted some of his adventures in space because she was a teacher of modern history. The beautiful Mrs. Logan taught science, so Faraday took her below to explain the atomic pile and how it worked. Okay. With the pre-recorded tape from the course computer running through the autopilot, Faraday pointed out the motion on the control rods that regulated the activity of the pile. Above the pile, he explained, was a huge tank of water that was used as a reaction mass. Water was fed through the pile, and its energy was raised to some tremendous degree. They hurled out through the throat of the reaction motor. Mrs. Logan then pointed to a series of little ports in the hull. Faraday explained, now then it is necessary to replace the control rods because they become transmuted into metals that have too little absorption factor. To get rid of them on a spaceport would mean the trouble of disposing quite a bit of metal that is dangerously radioactive. So we take the convenient method of tossing them out into space where they can't harm anything. But where do they land, she asked. Isn't that dangerous? Not at all. We use discretion. Look, in a few hours, we will be halfway to Pluto. Our velocity will be tremendous because we have the accelerating all the way from Mercury. To land on Pluto, we'll have to make a turnover at a halfway and start decelerating. If I wanted to replace control rods, well, I'd just do it before the turnover. The velocity of the ship and the rods would be a good many times the escape velocity of the entire solar system. So the rods, I say the rods will continue on, and actually they'd pass out of the solar system, beyond Pluto, in a matter of hours, long before we got there. Well, but supposing one did land on Terra, for instance, it would make an interesting looking meteorite, and it would melt in midair. Then the total radioactivity would spread thin, and no damage. Well, she was satisfied, and Faraday led her back to the salon. For the first time in years, Faraday began to feel at ease with the universe. His mind previously busy with the main problem, found time to consider other things. And like the rest of the spaceman breed, Faradine was something of a gadgeteer. Spacing, I hate that, in a sense, was very much like the manning of sailing a ship of the 19th century. When something needed attention, in space, it was during maneuver for landing, takeoff or turnover. On sea, it was coming about on attack or setting sail. A full-time attention was necessary. Between periods of activity, the spaceman sat in his duff and waited for one of the silent twinkles to detach itself from the stellar curtain above the observation dome, become a planet or a destination. Some spacemen reverted to the point where they built spacecraft in old bottles. Oh my God. Others spent their time in tinkering. Faradine had always been, one of the latter, and so was his mind felt at ease. He began to tinker with the gear down in the repair shop. It was a small room below the passenger section, hardly large enough to hold the machinery it contained, but Faradine, like many of his fellows, enjoyed making things, repairing things, and generally, experimenting. Every spaceman hoped to come up with something that would make him rich and famous. And some of them had done it. Oh, they had plenty of time, a good grasp of things scientific as well as manual dexterity. So Faradine tinkered happily. The shop, was silent. Oh, the usual milling around of his passengers stopped as they went to bed, and now there was only the occasional groan of metal upon metal or the faint whine as a motor somewhere wound up to do some automatic job. The click and clack of relays, were just barely audible. Now they would have been unheard by someone whose training had been other than that of the spaceman. In the background, there was the muted sibilant of the reaction motor, a sound like the shush of a distant seashore. Faradine heard the sounds, unconsciously, although they were pleasant to the ears of the spaceman, and the sounds of sailing ship were to the old-time seaman. But another faint sound came to disturb him, rising up into the level of audibility very slowly. It was a ringing in Faradine's ears. Ringing in the ears can come from too much alcohol, or a shot of dope, or a slap on the side of the head, or a change in the air pressure. Faradine had not been drinking nor taking the needle. What? Does he normally, or whatever? But he had spent many years in an environment where the air supply was important. He had become oversensitive to it. Burp, he sniffed automatically, the gesture of a man who has reason to suspect the quality of the air he is breathing. Yeah, he shook his head, and he did feel a bit lightheaded, and there was the bare trifle of a dull pain above his eyes and a sting in his nose. He sneezed, and brought forth a dribble of blood. Faradine raced aloft. He could settle nothing standing in the workshop. The bulkhead door between the hold of the Lancaster and the passenger section was closed. He pushed it, and he opened it with a slight difficulty to let a blow of air hit his face. He grunted in puzzlement. Any change in air pressure, any part of the ship, would have started a clangor of the puncture of the alarm. A racket loud enough to waken the dead. He went through the stateroom corridor and listened carefully as he went. Some rooms were silent, and others sounded like the song of a cross-cut saw working its way through the burl of maple. There were graduations of snores between the extremes, nothing that a suspicious man could put his finger on. He did not pause in the salon, which was silent and darkened, but not completely black. There was nothing out of the way here. In fact, the only thing that was out of line was the queer fact that the ship was silent when the alarm should have been sounding. He went up to the control room. Lamps told him the story in a series of quick appraisals. Because some of the long-forgotten genius that insisted that whatever is possible, warning devices would not be fused, could not be turn-offable, which is a word apparently, and should not be destructible. The Lancaster was a fine ship, designed well, but a frontal attack on a panel with the metal-cutting tools made the exception of the, quote, whatever possible, part of the design of warning signals. The ship's bell system had been opened like a tin can. But the pilot lamp system was strung here and there behind the panels, and it would have taken a major overhaul to ruin it. The saboteur would have spent all night opening cans instead of doing his dirty work. Faraday should have been asleep. Then he would not have noticed the blaze of lamps. Oh, they told him the tale in a glance. The low-pressure portion of the ship was down the pile bay. And the reason for that, one of the scuttle doors was open. The pressure in the reaction mass was low. But now, Faraday had come aloft. The pressure in the upper levels was as low as the reaction mass bay. As he watched, another one of the scuttle ports swung open, and its warning lamp flared into life. Faraday went into action. He ripped open the cabinet that held his spacesuit and clawed the thing from its hook. He started down the stairway on a stumbling run, getting into the suit by leaps and jumps and pauses. He realized that he should have moved faster if he stopped to do one thing at a time, but his frantic mind would not permit him to make haste slowly. So he stumbled and fell against the walls, and the tanks of his back rapped against the shoulder blades. And the helmet cut a divot out of the bridge of his nose. Luckily, it did not make him bleed, but it hurt like the devil. He zipped up the airtight closures, and by the time he reached the little workshop, he ducked in there to get a weapon of some sort. And he reached past the hammer. Oh, the hammer's the best weapon. Ignored the obvious chivel. No, chivels are good too, because it was not heavy enough. Even though it was sharp, he picked up a 14-inch half-round woodworking rasp. And he hefted it in his gloved hand, and it felt about right. The air brake on the top side was open, and Faraday closed it. He fretted the seconds necessary to equalize the pressure and check out the workings of the spacesuit, and he also located the cause of the air leakage. Normally, the air brake doors were airtight. A sliver of wool or cotton string lay in the rubber gasket, produced by a channel for the escape of some of the air to the pile bay. Faraday stopped. His attention attracted by this trifle of evidence. It was neither wool nor cotton, but a match torn from a giveaway book and used to light a cigarette for Miss Logan a good many hours before. Well, he threw it aside, went in, his attention once more on the important business before him, and he ran along a curved corridor, and there a figure in a spacesuit was quietly levering one of the control rods out of its slot and preparing to hurl it into the void. Faraday understood the whole act in one glance, because he's smart, and it was the sort of thing that would do if sabotage were his intention. The single scuttle port had been opened first by hand, then the saboteur had scuttled the stock of spare control rods, and since the Lancaster was reasonably new, there had been quite a batch of them, and furthermore, they were long, unwieldy, heavy things that took time to handle. Naturally, this was the first act, because the next act would cause the ship's acceleration to rise. This rise in acceleration would make the rods too heavy to carry. It would also cause investigation as soon as people became aware of the increasing pressure. Oh, yeah, and then the working rods would be hurled out. There's a lot of fucking detail around something I don't care about. Leaving the ship, heading toward the anonymous star at about 8 gravities of acceleration. The passengers and crew would be helpless and dead long before they got within any appreciable fraction of a distance of any planet. Maybe 2 or 3 of the rods have been scuttled already. Oh, the rest, functioning on the automatic, would have been shoved in farther to compensate. Faraday could feel no change in the acceleration pressure, but once the working rods were all the way home, the removal of the next would cause the ship to take off, literally, with the throttle tied down. Faraday was willing to bet the rest of his life that the safety valve that furnished in the water mass to the pile was either welded open or damaged in such a way that the supply could not be stopped. Then, Faraday had to admire the vandal's precautions. He would make his way to the escape hatch and let the helpless passengers go on. Ellipses. And on. Ellipses. Victims of another case of, quote, lost in space. Well, the saboteur was well prepared. His suit was a high-efficiency job capable of maintaining a man alive for a long time in space. It had a little radio for calling and a small and extensive chemical motor for mild maneuvering. And even though it would not be strong enough to permit planetary landing, the man had friends, obviously, lying in wait out there who would pick him up. A parcel of ice-cold-blooded murderers. Faradine saw the man through the red haze that clouded down over his eyes. His evaluation of the act made in a glance. And in this bare instant that it took for Faradine to see the man, he got to his feet in motion. He plunged forward with a bellow that hurt his own ears. Well, that's the end of that chapter. Why don't we go down to the smoking room and have, a cigarette and talk about what the hell we just read. There you are. Why don't you take a seat? Here in my smoking room, where you'll see a baboon skull on the table in front of you. If you take the cranium off the top of that baboon skull, you'll see it's filled with cigarettes. That's my wife's birds. What do we learn in this horrible episode? Not a whole lot. It's kind of a couple chapters of fluff. One, the woman that he's more or less being set up with by the woman's parents, which is so disturbing. Turns out, oh boy, she just wants to get married. And boy, is she sexual. And, but lucky for him, she's sexual, but she's also never had sex with anyone. So that's perfect. That's a 1950 man's dream, which is perfect for our new environment. He smooches her up, and then she leaves. He tries to feel if she can find a good body fit for him, and apparently it's perfect. And that's kind of it for Chapter 9. Chapter 10, you had a bunch of, like, a school outing for teachers for some reason, and they're all basically dumb names, like Mrs. Higginbotham, for whatever reason. And boy, does he really hate the school marms who are just sexless. And then boy, does he really, really love the women that are just sexy. And then just barely pays any lip service to the men on that ship. And then they all go to bed after just like a bunch of mice running around, tinkering with stuff, getting in the way. And then, of course, some of them have to act like they're housewives where they got to, like, clean the house, so they're all running around cleaning. I don't get it. And so, in the end, there's an airlock problem because somebody's sabotaging it. So, boy, that's exciting. This book, these last two chapters haven't been nearly as assault-laden as I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for that shoe to drop. It's going to happen. Because, and I kind of wish it would happen. This thing is like 24 chapters long. And I don't like it, but I'm committed, and so I'm going to keep reading it. But the second the assault happens, and it's not sympathetic, I'm dropping this thing. I've done it to Peter Pan. I'll do it again. So with that, thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week. Well, it appears you found me in the part of the podcast I hate the most, where I tell you all about the places on the internet where you can find me. You can tell I hate this because of the sound effects making it sound like a stormy night in the drawing room of the damned. Now, there's that. Are you cool? I like cool people. It's the reason why I got involved in this business to begin with, just to meet cool people. Not losers. So if you're cool, feel free to go over to my website, nuzzlehouse.com. But if you go there, you get to hear some of the other stuff that I and my wife work on, like the Radio Mystery Theater show, where we try to recreate the same show that used to be on in the 70s, but they don't make any episodes anymore. So we make our own, and we just steal all their commercials. And also Just Stay in the Curious Mind. We made a Christmas album. If you go to our link tree, you can see that we made a Christmas album. It's the first thing we did after getting married, which I think everyone should do when they get married, is start talking about the Christmas album they're going to make. And we're working on a new show where we give relationship advice by reading paranormal smut. And since I think you might be cool, you can always just email me directly. glenn.nuzzles@gmail.com. But don't email if you're a nerdlinger or a dork. Now, back to business. I can't believe I drank all of them already. There's got to be one left.